Hi, this is Larry Hatch, and another episode of 10 New and Modern Words for Success and Better Communication. Our first term today is Mukbang. People say Mukbang, but I understand in the original South Korean it's Muk, like M-O-O-K, Bong, B-O-N-G, and it basically is a hybrid of two words. Big surprise, that happens everywhere around the world. And it basically means food broadcast. And it started in South Korea and has expanded broadly to the West in a different context. But these type of programs, they're not really cooking shows. They're more like food evaluation shows, although there can be some cooking on them. It's an audiovisual broadcast, sometimes a posted video in the YouTube era, where the host consumes and evaluates a large volume of diverse foods or brands or styles, just tons of stuff, often in excess with extreme quantities, and the extreme quantities and diversity is sort of where it gets its appeal, binging almost, and seeking reactions from the audience, whether live on the TV show or in YouTube comments. And like in South Korea, it would be, let's make several styles of pizza, and we'll relate to that, or some of their own noodle dishes, and they would just have like everything there is, and that sort of thing. Now the Western version of it, which is more of a YouTube thing. Typical Western version might be like, we tried everything on the McDonald's menu, or we tried all of the top New York style pizza places, or we tried all of the major styles of barbecue, Texas, St. Louis, Eastern North Carolina, Western North Carolina, Kansas City. I think I forgot a bunch of them, but I guess California too. Oklahoma claims I think theirs is different than Texas, so it'd be something like that. It could be expanded into alcohol. Like, we try all of the so and so expensive brands of whiskey, and they might roll out $10,000 worth of bourbon bottles or something like that. And I'm trying to think of that particular brand I'm thinking of. Yes. Pappy Van Winkle or Blanton, something like that. They'll roll out just priceless bottles of this stuff and indulge in it to excess. I guess we know this when we see it, but like I say, trying everything on the Burger King menu, that would be a typical American version of this South Korean show. I don't know of any English language shows that actually do this, probably because YouTube is so powerful, but yeah. I know the South Korean presenters do very well. The next term is data mining. I think a lot of us have heard about that, especially if we work in business, but we're not really sure what that is. We know what analytics is, we know what statistics is, we know what our metrics are. Data mining is a form of analytics, and it's used to sort out, prioritize, and to make useful and actionable and important a very large amount of raw big data. And I think we've talked about big data, or will. Those are just millions and billions of data points in a matrix. It's analogous to mining to extract just 1 or 0.5% of gold, silver, copper from tons of crude ore. It's sort of like you got a lot of junk, and we want to get down to the 1% that's worth something and meaningful. So you might say, here's all of our customers' data, what they bought, when they bought it, how much they bought, what they paid for it, where they live, what their personal background is. Companies have huge amounts of information like this. Companies like Apple and Google and Amazon, my God, it's staggering how many billions of data points they have. And we know the federal government probably has trillions, as they're listening to me right now and watching you listen to this. I'm just kidding. No, echelon is real. Anyway, but it's data mining is a form of big data analytics, and you basically say, okay, we got all this data. Let's kind of sift it out. We really don't want this data. We're not interested in who bought toilet paper on Amazon Prime, but we're more interested in who bought electronics on Amazon Prime. So maybe they'll filter that down, and then they analyze it through many different analytical or statistical formulas, some very advanced algorithms, and they will prioritize the data and make it useful to an executive, not a statistician or analytics person. They make it actionable, and actionable is a term we've discussed, I think, meaning that you can make immediate decisions based on that information and analysis, and important. It's got to be useful, actionable, and important, and it's just getting to the gold, the gold out of that crude ore, what your business can use, and companies like SAS focus in on this kind of thing. A lot of the companies like IBM are heavily into data mining too. Our next term is a neoconservative. I think we heard that in the 90s a little bit, but it's sort of come up again because we've had some conservative people that weren't the same as old conservatives. And when we talk about an old classic conservative, let's think about Ronald Reagan. That would be kind of the benchmark. And a neoconservative is a person with a modified, modern right-wing philosophy that usually includes free market capitalism, strong military spending, they're a hawk, so to speak, interventionalist foreign policy, and physical discipline, balancing the budget, usually, or at least getting there in a 10-year plan that never happens. Limiting social spending and government waste. That you'd say, well, isn't that a classic conservative? No, classic conservatives are often people that are not interventionists. We do know that George W. Bush, for example, did not balance the budget, and there was very little fiscal discipline during his term. So he may not be what we call a neoconservative. He did do a lot of spending. He did do a lot of social programs. And so a neoconservative is generally somebody who believes in all of these elements, sort of a modern Ronald Reagan, if you will. But again, it's modified towards modern times and issues. Our next term is DevOps. Now, I know DevOps, developmental ops, has a meaning in the Special Forces community. We're not talking about that, although the term was probably adapted from them to the corporate world. But I'm using it here as a business term. It's the developmental operations of a corporation, usually in terms of creating software and hardware products for internal and external use, often with a set of advanced tools, modules, or technologies to improve cost, efficiency, agility, and time to testing. It's basically a high-level development team, and they're using hardware, software, all the best available technology to produce a product and to manufacture the product and to deliver an advanced product to the consumer. I think we've talked about Elon Musk, and he said it's not about building cars, it's about building the machines that build cars. And he's not just talking about robots, he's talking about the gigapresses too, and other technologies. So DevOps is a higher level corporate development, using all of the advanced tools and technologies that are available, not throwing billions of dollars at something. You want to be agile, quick, efficient, and get things done. And I think Tesla would be a good example of that. Again, it's not building the cars, it's not building the batteries, that's important, but it's building the machines that make the batteries, it's building the machines that make the cars, and it's also building the machines that make the factories that build the machines that make the cars and the batteries. So it's a whole series of technologies overlapping, and they may start out as an internal thing like developing your factory and your processes, but then it eventually turns into a consumer product. Our next term is nationalized foods, and this is something I actually got off of YouTube. Let's give a quick example. What's the difference between Nutella in the United States and Nutella in Germany? Different formula. What's the difference between the McDonald's Big Mac in Japan and in the United States? What's the difference between a famous brand of something in one country versus another? And often they're different. And part of the reasons they're different are legal reasons. Some things are allowed in American products that are banned in Europe. Some things are allowed in third world countries that are banned in the United States. So what corporations are they'll put the cheapest junk in there they can get away with. So in some countries they can get away with cheap stuff, others they can't. That's probably oversimplifying it, but that's often the case. These products are customized to the nation where they're sold, again, to follow the food laws in terms of chemistry and purity. It's usually done by large international corporations. They may vary the name slightly. They might put an American flag on it, or a German flag, or an Italian flag. I've been told that a lot of Italian products in the United States are not as good as the stuff in Italy. Yeah. In fact, sometimes an Italian oil will have oil from Brazil added to it, obviously for economic reasons. They'll change the graphics a little bit and the ingredients. Some products are sweeter in the United States or sweeter elsewhere. The texture can be different. The spices can be different. What's considered hot in one country is not hot in another. And again, the chemicals, some things are banned. It's not just about regulations, it's about local tastes and preferences. And, these companies spend millions of dollars on taste testing of products, especially foods, which is our subject here. And they'll say, oh, well, we need to sweeten this ketchup if it's going to sell in Sri Lanka. We need a drier, more vinegary ketchup if it's going to sell in Italy. Those are just hypotheticals. We need a little more spicing of the ketchup if it's to sell in Brazil. That kind of thing. You just sort of customize the food, both in terms of the graphics and its contents. I'll leave it at that. Bolo. We've seen this on TV shows a couple of times. In fact, they say it so fast. Bolo. Issue bolo. That stands for be on the lookout. And it's sort of like some police terms is kind of seeped into general conversation. Like I might say, I'm going to send out a bolo for Whiskers because the cat's missing. Something like that. Or a friend maybe, or a relative you haven't seen in a couple days and you can't reach. But it's a law enforcement term on the form of a message through their special channels to diligently try to locate a person. Sometimes it's just a vehicle of a particular description, name and number that may have that person in it, or persons of interest. Persons of interest, that's another term. Having immediate connection to a recent crime or investigation. Now, a bolo may not be a crime subject. That just might be somebody who we saw on camera. We saw that there was a a 97 Toyota Camry with a busted door handle that was at the crime scene, and then when we got there, it was gone. So we think that person's a witness to the crime. So we're looking for that particular black Camry. Have you seen it? Be out to look. So that person is just a witness. They're not a criminal suspect. But very often a bolo is a pretty high level thing, and it's usually the person or vehicle that's associated with committing the crime. But like I say, it's seeped into popular culture, and it's so used on so many cop shows that we all sort of know what it means now, or will. The next term is the C level, and that's an adjective actually. It's the highest group of an organization in management, such as the CEO, CFO, COO, CTO. Chief Customer Satisfaction Officer. All these things start with C for chief. And these are usually the people that run the company at the highest level, at least below the board of directors. And chief executive officer is usually the head guy or girl. Chief financial officer is the top money person. The chief operating officer is the one who handles the day-to-day operations of a factory or store or something like that. Chief technology officer, it might be in terms of product development, production technology. And there's similar titles. Like I say, there's a nice chief customer happiness representative. There's all kinds of C-level terms out there. But when we say C-level, we usually mean the top management of a corporation or organization too. So that's kind of a handy way of saying the big boys or girls. Our next two terms are kind of related, and I wanted to discuss them because they do overlap a little bit, but they do mean different things. First term is sustainable. What the heck is sustainable? And by the way, be skeptical, because we are creating a sustainable we're creating a sustainable office campus, and you're like, aren't they spraying herbicide on the grass over there? Didn't you just cut down 400 trees that are going to take 200 years to regrow to build your building? There's a lot of things called sustainable and green that aren't. Obviously, there are certifications like LEED, but sustainability is a term anybody's pretty much free to use. And it's said of a society or practice that can be maintained over time long term. Let's think a century. With regard to economic viability, ecological safety, and available resources. So let's say those are the three criteria, and I just picked those from my studies of it. It's got to make sense for the environment. They have to be available resources. You're not going to put $5 million wind turbines, in a third world country where they couldn't begin to pay for the electricity. And it has to be economically viable. So it has to be sensible. So there's a lot of green projects or eco-friendly projects that are not economically viable, and the available resources are not there. There was a time that copper was in shortage, so solar panels were not really sustainable. And as I think we found out, solar panels don't always last more than 20 years sometimes, even the good brands. So, is solar energy really sustainable with our current technology? That's really if you got to spend $30,000 to put solar panels on your house, and then in 20 years replace them, add another $40,000, is that sustainable? Very questionable, really. And sustainable is often looking at the long term. Can we do this without it running downhill, pollution accumulating, money hemorrhaging? I know, and I'm going to get comments on this. I know Germany had this big solar powered thing, and they were putting solar panels everywhere. And then I am told, and I have also read this, that the price of electricity doubled over a period of time when other countries nearby it just went up like 10 or 20%. So, were those German solar projects sustainable? They were certainly environmentally nice and green, I guess. Um, but they doubled the price of power to a lot of people that couldn't really afford that. So then government had to step in and subsidize it. Again, let's get back to the solar panels again. Um, do you have $30,000 to put solar panels on your house, and then 20 years again, uh, put another set on for 40,000, and then you got to take those old panels off and recycle them with all of their stuff in them? Yeah, is that? Yeah, I don't know. Is that really sustainable in the way we want it to be? Our next term is related. It's renewable. Adjective. A set of resources, activities, or practices which are easily replaced, grown again, or created, and not quickly lost or depleted. A renewable is something that can grow or occur again. Um, you cut down a tree, you plant another tree. You get some steak from a cow, you can grow another cow. You eat some eggs, the hens will make some more eggs. Those are renewables. Um, and they're not quickly lost or depleted. Now, there's renewables and there's renewables. There's a good use of terms. Now, if you cut down a 300-year-old tree to make a house, how long is it going to take you to get that tree back? Maybe 310 years with new environmental pressures going on. So that is technically renewable. That pine tree is technically renewable, or Douglas fir, redwood, whatever it is. But it's not renewable over a short period of time, and it's probably not sustainable. If we're cutting down all the 100 and 200-year-old trees, yes, they can be renewed and replanted, but how long will it take till we run out of those big timbers that we need? Is that sustainable? So something can be renewable but not sustainable, sustainable but not renewable, and so on. Um, so maybe you guys can share with me some examples of where one is one thing, one is both, or one is neither. Um, and again, the sustainability has to do with not just environmental friendliness, but economic and available resources. So there's a much more stringent thing on that. Renewables, a renewable would not be petroleum like fossil fuels. And I know people have said, well, yeah, of course, we're all going to be turning into, fuel oil someday. Well, yeah, millions of years maybe. So that's not really considered a renewable. A fossil fuel is not really considered a renewable, even though a million years from now, yeah, I guess we're all going to be renewed into, something. But presumably they won't need fossil fuels then. Anyway, so I probably belabored this point too far. But anyway, please give me some examples of where something's sustainable but not renewable, renewable but not sustainable, both or neither. There's 4 different states there. Neospecies. These are relatively new organisms in terms of popular culture, although they may be long known to science, which meet the new needs, the current needs of modern society in terms of trends, flavor, nutrition, economic demand, or production systems. It's often a trendy new plant, animal, or consumable chemical from nature. Or, it might be a chemical extracted from bacteria or living organisms. It's got to be a living species. Typically, a neo-species is something new to science, but the way this term has been used, it's sort of new to commerce or popular culture. And I think we all know those. Quinoa, Quinoa, Inoa, which people still pronounce quinoa. Acai, Acai. Some people pronounce acai, but it's acai. Those are two. One's a grain. Quinoa is a grain. Acai is a fruit. Those are sort of neo species. They just kind of hit the scene, and everybody's clamoring around them. As I read this, I have a bottle of ashwagandha in front of me. That is a herb that reduces stress, cortisol levels in the body, possibly testosterone. Although I did it for stress and energy primarily, and that's something that actually works. So that's kind of a neo species. It's been known in science for ages, but in popular culture and commerce, it's new and trendy. I'm trying to think of some other stuff that are actually plant or animal species. Well, maybe let's talk about bison. For many centuries, the native indigenous people, I'm not going to call them Americans or Indians or anything like that, the native indigenous people of the North American continent harvested buffalo, bison, but the species bison, and they harvested only what they needed, and some people came along, got greedy, and just almost wiped them out for their fur coats. But now bison is sort of a neo species. There's bison farms in many states, both cold and warm, because it's a tough animal. And I can go to probably 7 or 8 grocery stores in my area and get bison meat and bison burgers. And some restaurants offer that. So bison is sort of a neo species. It was saved from extinction and is now a viable commercial source of meat with some advantages. But again, I think quinoa and acai are probably better examples of neo species because they just people hadn't heard about them in the West generally, and they just kind of broadsided us. So anyway, thanks for listening. Please comment with humor, better examples, redefinitions, corrections. Again, please be civil and respectful. And thanks again for your time.